Good evening, Hyper Spinners. Today we're going to be talking through HyperHQ. This is the way to set up your systems and get things running. So let's get started. Alright guys, so you've seen the video to install Hyperspin as well as Hyperlaunch. So you guys are well on your way to get Hyperspin up and running. So the last thing we've got to do is configure HyperHQ. So that will be found in your install folder that you installed Hyperspin, and it's HyperHQ. So you boot that up, and then you're going to find something that looks like this. So first things first, we're going to be in the main settings, and in the general tab, you're going to select mode multi because you're going to have multiple wheels. If you only want one single wheel, which I highly doubt, you'll use single here. And you'll select a single mode name as Mame here from the drop down. Also check the use last system. We're going to go to screen. So if you want full screen Hyperspin, it's going to be checked enabled. And Hyperspin supports 1024 by 768, nothing larger. So you've got to put that in there. And scan lines, that all comes default here. Next, we've got the Optimizer tab. What I've done is I've selected app quality as best and image smoothing. Your specs might make you change differently here. The app quality, you want to basically get best or high if all possible. It will just provide a nicer look to everything. And the image smoothing you'll want to check regardless. In terms of the middle column, we've got a number of different backgrounds here. And depending on your specs to your computer, Hyperspin might put a damper on your system. So what I mean is if you click, all the way through level 3 and level 4, it might slow down your wheel depending on the number of games that you have in your system. So what worked well for me, because I like a nice snappy wheel, I checked everything through level 2, and I've got special backgrounds and themes wait for the special. So basically I want to make sure that transitions happen before the theme shows up. So this is just forcing it to allow a streamlined process where the transitions that happen in between aren't sporadic after you've already selected something. And then also off to the right, I'm using animation artwork, so that's special artwork A, B, and C, and then the CPU priority. So I want Hyperspin to use the priority of all of my CPU because it's, let's be honest guys, it's for the arcade. So yeah, that's all that is. Go into the attract mode tab, and this attract mode is essentially saying if you want to leave the arcade on for X number of minutes here, once that elapses, then what it'll do, it will breeze through your wheel automatically, and then it'll stop on a game. Just it's in track mode. So mine's set to 3 minutes. I'm actually going to set that to 5 minutes here just to show you that I've changed it. Also Hyperspin, this is basically going to allow you to the attract mode for Hyperspin as well. So I want an intro video. So when you guys start your Hyperspin XE, if you want the video enabled for a video preview, you'll want that enabled. And I've unchecked wait for video because sometimes I'll want to skip the video, and I can do that just by pushing the X button on my controller or H for my key press. And then this is just the number of seconds that it spans, and you can see here what each one of these means here, and yeah, that's it, guys. So we've got the attract mode, and we've got intro videos, and yeah. So we're gonna move on. And then we've got sound. So I've got everything set up here. I've got hyper speech, so that's what that interface volume is all about. I moved that down just a little bit lower here, and or sorry, that's for sound effects. So that's the wheel sounds. Yeah, the wheel volume and the sound effects. Yep, so this is like when you are going to exit and you move the arrow, you hear the little clicking sounds. That's what that is. So I've got that slightly lower than the others here, and the descriptions are all below there. Then we've got startup and exit tab. Sorry, Mega was going. Then we've got startup and exit. This is essentially going to be enabling your video preview. You can see all these are set to check here, and the exit is set to default, and my exit action is just to close a Hyperspin. If I chose to shut down my computer when Hyperspin is done, then you'll select shutdown. So user preference here. You'll want a startup script, and if you guys haven't seen my video already on startup scripts, go and check that out. That will be launching some applications behind the scenes to make everything look streamlined and work. So that's what this path is all about. Also, the exit program, I've got a nested wheel, so I've got this path to my main menu changer exit exe. You might not need this path here if you've just got a regular Hyperspin setup. I do encourage you to get the startup program as your startup script, so definitely check that download out. Next, so we've got stop intro on key press, so there it is again. You check that, and that allows you to stop the intro video when you start Hyperspin if need be. And then we're going to go to tools, and I've got LED blinky set to enabled. I don't have LED buttons on my cabinet yet, but I hope to soon. My path is EDS, so this is just a way to call hyperspeech, hypermarquee. It's basically a calling application that will work hand in hand with Hyperspin. This used to be set to my hyperspeech folder because I wasn't using a nested wheel. But now that I am, the only way to get hyperspeech and the nested wheel is to map this to EDS, which is that calling program. So if you guys don't have the nested wheels set up yet, use the LED blinky path to your hyper search folder. And if you haven't watched that video yet, definitely check that out, because that sorry, the hyperspeech folder, that definitely adds an extra layer to your Hyperspin setup. It tells you what the system it is, tells you the game descriptions for Mame. So your LED blinky is either hyperspeech or it's EDS that you're mapping it to. And you can just click the little folder icon here to explore for your folder. Next, we've got high score. You want to enable that, and this is my location. This is just the default location. And yeah, that is the main settings here. We're going to go off to wheel settings next, and this is going to be a list of all your systems. So I'm going to go down to Mame because that is a favorite. And what you're going to notice when you're first doing this for the first time, there's going to be nothing in this drop down here. So I'm going to show you guys how to add a system, but since we're here and since we're working left to right, I'm going to talk through the main settings here. So so this next tab here, that main menu wizard, all it is, guys, is if you push the plus sign, this will allow you to create a new system. It'll just ask you for the name, and you're going to want to type precisely the name of that system. So a capital letter and then the name. So you would type in capital M, Mame, and then you'd hit OK. and then it would basically say congratulations. Once you get through that, you'll just click over to the wheel settings tab, and then you'll find Mame. And what happens on the back end when you guys do that, when you are in your root Hyperspin folder, what it'll do is it'll create a media folder for your Mame, and then it will also create in the database folder a Mame folder. It won't have a Mame XML. You'll have to retrieve that from Hyperspin or create your own. So let's continue. So this is Mame. We're in the Emulator tab. And what you're going to do is select Execution Hyper Launch, which is aka Rocket Launcher. PC game, you're going to disable this. The only time this is really going to be enabled is if it was a PC game. And then execution, so this is with the assumption that you already have Mame as an exe setup. You just point that to that exe, and then your game path. Then you're just pointing to where you've placed those games at, and then your extension. So with Mame, it's 7z, zip, chd, text, and exe. And then it basically just runs that extension in that order. Search for subfolders, enable, and use full game path enabled there, and when state is hidden. You're going to see the command line here is preview. You're going to type in hyperlaunch exe, and then put in quotations Mame, and then quotations the name. So that's all there is to it, guys. I know it's pretty complex, but hopefully this is helping. So next we're going to go to the wheel, and this is all by default here. What this basically is saying is the style. So we can basically change the location of the wheel. So by default, it's off to the right here. It's in that oval sort of location, but you could basically make it horizontal. You can make it go across the exe. You can also change the position. So if you don't like it on the right-hand side, you can move it onto the left-hand side. Also the speed, so you can make it slower if the wheel is too fast for you. You can also change the size of the image of the wheels that you have, the location. Then you've got this alpha. So once you've selected a wheel or just hover over it, then the wheel art will, display however you choose the alpha. I generally like once you've selected a game, it will fade away, to display as this. After just a few seconds, and if you wanted to make this darker and never sort of fade on you or disappear, you'd move this slider all the way to 1. If you don't want to see the wheel at all once you've selected a game, then you'd move this to 0. So you can see I've got just sort of a watermark of that the wheel is still there. So yeah, and then the pointer, if you want to see the pointer sort of bump left to right as you guys are selecting games, you want that to be set to animated. And for what it's worth, I've never touched the wheel text, so cause I have media, so it doesn't really bother me. If you didn't like the default text that displays like this, you could play around here to make it a different font, essentially. The gradients, the color. Lots of options there. Next, we're going to go to navigation and themes. So what I've done is I only want parent games for Mame, and all you've got to do to hide the children or the mods, if you will, we're just going to be checking the use parent videos and use parent themes, and that will parents only. So that will get the job done there. But in terms of everything else, the game jumps. So this is when you hit the left or right joystick. It will, when you're on the wheel, it will jump 50 games, into the future or into the past. Of course, you always have that search as well, where you can hold the left or right and you can choose a letter. So jump timer, so this is after 400 seconds, the wheel will just spin to a random game if left untouched. But what you also want to do for every system is make sure that the reload backgrounds is checked. This just ensures that your themes are, synced up correctly when you are in Hyperspin, so things don't get, left behind, meaning like you're on a theme and then you choose another game. You want to make sure that that new game's theme is displaying correctly. So I always make sure that reload backgrounds is on, and the animated out default themes is also on. So these are always set to true here whenever I set up a new system. Just personal preference. Also, when you are in a system, I want to make sure that I return to the last game that was played. And you could also choose to start on random game if you like that better. Also, with the wheel filters, if you want to just find all of the game, or if you only want to display the games that have themes, you would check this. And this is specific to the one system that we're setting up now, which is Mame. Also, if you want only wheels that you have, you'll check that. So this was just another safeguard approach to ensure that I'm only on parents, because I don't have children art, if you will. I don't have the the modifications to those games. I've only got the official ones. And that's it for that tab. So we're going to go to videos, and you're just going to set that. This really doesn't need to be set up on each system. Choose it if you will, but all this is doing is just placing a path for where you're placing your videos. I think generally speaking, I did put something in here, and this was just the in the media folder. Once you've created a main menu, essentially from this further, this next tab, it will create the media folder for you guys, and in each one of these media folders, it all looks the same. So it's consistent, and you're going to see something that looks like this: images, sound, themes, and videos that we've already talked about before. And you're just going to path that to your video folder. So that is that. And then we're going to sounds. So this is just enabling that sound clicking. If you don't like the clicking sound, you just uncheck that. And then we've got special art. So, I like the special art. Special art A, I believe, is down here, and as well as B. So if you don't want those, the joysticks and the press start and what have you, or if you customize it, you just uncheck those and then those won't show up. Special art C, if you don't like the genre art or the text that comes across that says genre, you just uncheck that and that won't show up anymore. I've actually moved my graphic up in the top right, and it's very tasteful, I feel like. So you can move the things by using the X and Y axis, and and then you've got the types of animation. So I've got fade. I mean, you'll see in the showcases and what have you, down at the bottom, it fades to the next button schema. So I've got an Xbox controller schema, I've got PlayStation schema, and then the buttons on my control panel. So I've got it set to fade. It looks a little classy. So next we've got the control tab, since we've already talked about the main menu wizard. So this is going to be setting up your controls for Hyperspin. So this is how you control the wheel itself. So you're just going to select, you're going to click in here, press the button, and hit set. And you're going to do that for each one of these. So Hyperspin is going to be sort of this hyperspin. If you hold down that button and press up or down, it's going to spin that wheel pretty fast. That's the function in the startup script. This hyperspin is basically, if you push that button, it's going to do like a Russian roulette. It's going to spin through there and then pick a random game for you. Next, we've got genres. So as you guys are modifying your XML, you can create genre XMLs, and if you push that button, then you'll be able to see those genres and you'll be able to select from them. Next, we've got favorites, and this is basically just a way to, once you've hovered over a game, you push this button, and then it'll ask you, do you want to add to favorites? And you do that, and your favorites will display. So, yep. Next, we've got start. So this is how you activate your games, and then exit. I've got set to my back button. So, as you're in the wheels, if you push the back or the exit button, it will go back a wheel, or it will exit Hyperspin. Let's see, we've got keyboard delay, so I've got that enabled, and we set up player 2. So you're just clicking in here, and then you're hitting set to save each one of these. Your joysticks, so I don't have these enabled because there is a bug within Hyperspin. If you have a joystick plugged in, then and you have these enabled, then the wheel will just continue to spin forever. So you want to make sure that those are unchecked, and nothing to see there. Trackball, I do have a trackball. If I want to enable that, I just click that, and that would control the wheel, but I'd rather use the joystick because there's I feel like there's more control. Next, we got spinner. So I also have a spinner, but again, I don't want to control the wheel with my spinner because I like the extra control. And then we've got the about tab, which is blank here. So all credits go to Bad Boy Bill, and that is HyperHQ. So your workflow when you're adding a new system, you just go straight to the main menu wizard, hit the plus sign, and then type in the name of the system. And then you'll go to wheel settings. You'll find that wheel that you've just set up, and we'll flip back to Mame. And then you'll essentially edit the emulator tab. You'll find the executable, you'll find the game path, and you'll set up the extensions. The wheel art is, you won't be touching again. The themes and navigation you will be touching, and you'll be just clicking these two options here, the animation and the reload, and you might end up changing some of the wheel filters there. But outside of that, guys, that's about it. You might play with that special art, but that is rinse and repeat process. That is how you use HyperHQ. So get to it, guys, and let me know if you guys have any problems. All right, bye.